All right. So for our bonus Patreon and YouTube subscriber content, I'm gonna try that again. I'm sorry. Hey everybody, this is our bonus content for the week. We'll probably have some other bonus content out there as well, but we wanted to throw together the construction of the top 30 prospect list. So every report, with the exception of Gibson, Long, and Jack O'Loughlin, which will be up today, is up on our website, tigermindreport.com. And so, Chris, tell them how we came together as a consensus to come up with this top 30.
So yeah, for this one, we had four different people. The two of us, we had Jerry, and it was Alan, right? I forget Alan's last name. But the four of us, we all made our own individual top 35 lists, if not more, right? I think some of us went out to 30 or 40, just because. And then basically it was just a matter of finding the averages and then ranking that. And so for the most part, there was a surprising amount of consensus on a lot of players, right? I think basically within the top 10, there was very little disagreement. And even within the top 15, it was pretty close. And then after that, and that's probably the way with most farm systems is there's going to be a little bit of disagreement about who are the best secondary, tertiary prospects in the system. But and then I think we had sort of a small discussion afterward. Generally speaking, if there's a tie, we kind of give, I don't know, a little bit of weight to position players over pitchers, and then also a little bit of weight of guys closer to the majors than guys lower in the minors, right? For the most part, like it depends. If there's a tie with, Max Clark, we'll probably move Max Clark ahead because he was a first rounder. But yeah, that's basically it. It's not. I mean, there. We just find it easier to do it this way. So we all get kind of a general consensus. And something I said on the show last night is that it's also a good way for some of us to kind of root out our own blind spots. So yeah, there you can see all our personal rankings. And you'll notice that some of us, like where I have O'Loughlin, I don't even think I had him. Where is he? I don't see him on there. I don't think I had him in my top 30, but you guys all had him around 20, 25 in that range. And so that, the law of averages got him down into our top 30, even though I didn't really have him in there. And you see, like you look at Paul Wilson. So the Tigers' third round pick, I had him in the top 20. I had him 20th. Jerry had him 18th. Alan had him 15th. But Rogelio didn't have him in his top 30 because he's got kind of a I don't know what you call it, but a policy. It's a policy, damn it, of not necessarily giving guys high rankings if you've never seen them play pro ball, which is totally fine. But the three of us having them highly ranked still pushed him into the top 20. And that's one of the things we want to maintain our individual rankings, our individual opinions, our individual biases, and things like that. Like if you look back at that, I think I had Young 6-7 spots below anybody else, and that's just that's our way to, like I said, keep our individual opinions there, but also try to find a general consensus. And I think we did. I think we did a pretty good job of at this point in time, coming up with a solid top 30 for the Detroit Tigers right now.
Yeah, and look, I know that people probably I know with prospects, it's all about the potential, but to be honest, I just don't. I've never felt comfortable with like even like one of the reports I did was on Leonard and
Eddie's Leonard.
Yeah, Eddie's Leonard. Yeah, Eddie's Leonard. I was trying to say with an accent, but anyway, I felt uncomfortable because I was just watching video on him. So I rather see some things in person live or get even some watching him in Toledo. But yeah, so O'Loughlin I had at number 18, Melton, and then Reddy was around the same thing. So it's just personal preference, and Chris is right. Like I don't get until I see more of a player, then I'll feel comfortable doing it, because a lot of times you'll see some sites that will just do like a tier system, which is fine, and they'll do something and they'll have like a paragraph about the person. To me, it doesn't paint a detail. I'd rather have some sort of, okay, I've at least watched a half hour, or I've watched a lot of video on him, or I've seen him live in person and I noticed these tendencies, versus just making a blanketed statement. So as much as I try to do as much research as I can, Chris has his own way. Jerry definitely has his own way. I'm not sure how Alan came to his conclusions, but we all have some sort of database to it. So
Yeah, and just like so I can give you the actual numbers. This I had a Lachlan 39th on my list. Uh, Jerry had him 15th, Rogelio had him 18th, Alan had him 20th. So clearly I was way on the outlier there, and it probably dragged down his overall ranking. But as I said on the show last night, I think it was a good sort of lesson for me to say, all right, what am I seeing here that's not right? And then so I cut up Lachlan's most recent start, and it's hard to draw a clear line of distinction between him and Brant Herter, who we had I think 15th overall, and I don't know where I had him in the where did I have Herter? I had Herter 18th. So yeah, like is Jack O'Loughlin really 21 prospects worse than Brent Herter? I don't think so. I think it was just me kind of you know you could say it's a mistake, but it was just the way I ranked it, and it was corrected by the rest of the gang, if you will, and that's fine. Like I said earlier, the other one I mentioned was Jace Young. I had Jace Young. He's 14th on my personal list, and 10th on Jerry's, 6th on Rogelio's, 5th on Allen's. So we kind of balanced each other out there, and up in the top 10. I think he's 7th on the list, um, which is good. So yeah, I mean that's basically the process. We want to try to come to the fairest conclusion we can, and obviously we share opinions with each other. It's going to color things, but we all have our own eyes. We all have our own methods, like Rogelio said. So we feel like this is a fair way to do it. And also the thing we always say, this is the prospect lists are just a snapshot in time.
yep.
The things may change within 3 weeks, within a month, but by this time next year, things may drastically change. We're just trying to capture our opinions of these players at this exact moment. Doesn't mean that their future is determined by any of this. It doesn't mean that they can't get better, they can't get worse. It's just a fun thing to do and to have for future reference.
Also, don't take everything in the MLB pipeline, some lists as Bible either. I mean, you can interpret the data every way you will. A lot of times say, well, this list has it at number 5 or whomever. That's fine. They had their own criteria with that. In some cases, it's industry based off what they scout here, because a lot of times they don't have a lot of time to cover everybody. So we have the news, at least we have the nuance to give you what we see live, because you see it with us and with the extra content and us talking about it weekly. And now this year, I think we've been able to really dedicate ourselves a lot more to this, because A, you've given us this extra money and we appreciate it. And B, you've been more specific on what you're looking for. And so the more feedback we get, the better our content will be. So that's something that we're some point we want to do a newsletter, have everybody subscribe to it, maybe do that like a monthly newsletter, something to that effect. We'll see. But either way, we wanted to go into the how the sauce is made, if you will, of the top 30. And we'll start with number 30, Josh Crouch, who, Chris, you have your notes, and I was looking at your notes because you have. So right now we have it'll be an update that'll be going out once all the reports are done. So that update will just be basically a summary of how everything went.
Ooh,
And
nice,
Crouch.
nice graphic. I just saw the graphic you made for it. Sorry.
Oh,
Very
thank
nice.
you.
Yeah, go ahead. Crouch.
I was gonna say Crouch, and Chris, I did like what you said, and I thought it was a fair what you said. He moved down 12 spots. His power's down to 40. His defense is down from down 5 to 45. And we saw a little bit of that early on at Erie, where he had a heart. You could see the difference in pitching right away as soon as he left. I hate to say it that way, but
yeah, I mean, this is always difficult, right? Because we root for these players. We want them to succeed. Josh Crouch gave us an awesome interview. We like him a lot, but we try to be objective and realistic about these sorts of things. And Crouch I think he was named a defensive catcher of the year in the Midwest League last year, right? By managers, and so there's this reputation of being a strong defender. And we saw him; he's got a really good arm, and we thought he was a little bit raw in the other areas, but yeah, once he got to Double A, it was he just kind of got overwhelmed on both sides of the ball. It seemed like he really struggled to hit. It was a continuation of what happened when he got up to Double A at the end of last year, and there were also there's just some feeling that he wasn't great at catching. It's simply at catching the ball, framing, presenting just too busy, hands moving too much, and that's one of the most important things for catchers now, right? There's a huge difference between Dylan Dingler and Rodriguez and Feliciano, and Crouch was struggling with that too. So they sent him back to West Michigan, and generally speaking, that's not a great sign, right? Even Dingler got hurt. They didn't call Crouch back up. That's another sign, right? So we try. One of the other things we always say, right, is that organizations kind of tell you what they think about these players by what they do with them. And yet just the stats haven't been there. He's still a solid offensive performer, but the power, I don't know what it like. His isolated power is down by like 100 points this year. And me, I'm just looking at him. He seems thinner this year. He was a sturdy kid last year, and he just looks skinnier to me. And my presumption was that they did that to get a little bit more mobile, because I thought that was his weakest spot last year with catching. Was he just didn't have great lateral agility, and I think he's cut down on the pass balls and things like that. But it's a tough balancing act because the power just seems to have gone away, which is unfortunate.
Even with the robot umps approaching, you still want to have a good catcher that has a good frame rate, or just not stab when you're catching. The first thing you taught is just to kind of go with the pitch and go with the flow of it all. Versus sometimes we saw Crouch do this quite a bit in Erie. He was stabbing, and so again, you can rise up sooner or later. It's not the end of the world kind of thing. So it's not reflective on his overall talent, because I think there's a talented bat in there. It just has to get back, and maybe it's like a mental thing with him. Number 29 is Tyler Madsen, and it was a report done, really well done report here by, I believe it was Benji. Yeah, Benji did a report for this, and he's been impressive in Erie. He got some time in Arizona Fall League. That's where we first saw him on video. That was the first time I saw him, or I saw extensive amounts of him, I should say. And yeah, there's a lot to like in this.
Like Mason. Sorry, it looks like Mason did Madison.
Oh, Mason did. Okay, Mason did. Yeah, my apologies.
Yeah. So yeah, as you said, we just saw him in Erie, and it was actually his worst outing yet in Erie. And by that, he gave up a hit. He gave up a couple hits in a run. He had gone his first 11 innings without giving up a hit. It's yeah, he looks like a potential solid reliever at the big league level. The stuff is good enough to work 7th or 8th innings. It's about consistency for him, really, and he's been pretty consistent in Double A so far. It's just you have to take a step up when you get up to the big leagues. But it's a big league arm. I think we said fastball's like 94, 96. He's touched 98 in the past, and it's like straight over the top with tons of ride. We talk about induced vertical break a lot. He was breaking 23, 24 inches in some of his pitches. It's like 20 inches on average, which is really borderline elite. So there's a lot of carry on the fastball through the zone, and he's got the downer breaking ball and a pretty nice changeup to go along with it. I think the changeup, I want to say Mason called it his best pitch. So yeah, it's a fun relief prospect, but it's the relief only prospect. So you can only put him so high on your top 30 without a guy. It's not like closer stuff, I don't think. Right? It's not.
I think it's more like a setup man.
Yeah, closers these days, you're throwing 98 plus, or you have absurd secondaries, and he's not quite there. But it's a real good arm, and he's a big leaguer, I think.
Yeah, so there's a lot about him too, and the Tigers are really big fans of him too, as he's moved up in the Erie, and so something to look out for, not only possibly the season, but going forward. So he could be that next Brandon White, where he just comes up and some point next year and makes the ball club, maybe out of spring training, who knows? But at number 28, and I like what you said here. This is for number 28 is that Dylan Smith, and what you said in your notes is very accurate, which is he felt kind of like incomplete the prospect evaluation, because he started the year in Erie and we haven't seen much of him. He started 3 starts and then he was injured, and since then it's been a long road to recovery.
Yeah, I want to say his first outing this year was actually a tandem start with maybe Wilmer Flores, and it was a disaster. Like he couldn't even finish an inning. He couldn't throw strikes. He was having trouble with the landing spot, and yeah. So and then he pitched a couple more outings. None of them were great, although he did rack up some strikeouts. And then he went on the injured list with the forearm strain, and he just came back like 2 weeks ago. Right, had 2 or 3 outings down in the complex league, and was scheduled to start Sunday for the Whitecaps, but the game was rained out. So it's really hard to know. He was a guy, when he was healthy, he was kind of exciting. He's a skinny but good mover on the mound, athletic, and had feel for 4 different pitches. The changeup really came along toward the last half of last year. Kind of, I think it's more of like a split change or a Vulcan change or something like that. But really, yeah, what we wanted to see from him was maybe some velocity gain just based on filling out his frame and maybe a little bit more command. And it's hard to tell from his limited appearances. But we didn't want to kick him entirely off the list because we do think that there's still some moderate upside there.
Especially on his, I think his curve when it's on is a really, really good pitch because he can throw at least consistently on lefties without to get some swing and miss stuff. So that's a good sight to see. But yeah, you're right. Until we see a little more, we'd like to hopefully gets back like all of them rise up again. Number 27 is the second round draft pick from 2023, Max Anderson. Benjamin did the project or the report on him, and we saw they hit his first major league or first professional home run. I believe it was yesterday or on Sunday rather against Clearwater. And although there's something that I was talking to somebody about this, I can see this guy based off his build, maybe being a potential first baseman down the line. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that was some of the speculation there in the draft capsules, right, by Pipeline and Baseball America and stuff. They compared him to kind of a Max Muncy style second baseman, which is like he can play second base because he hits. Now, I you don't want to project Max Anderson to be a Max Muncy hitter who 30 plus bombs every year and hitting, I don't know, 190 to 220, but with tons of walks. But so yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a first base is a potentiality down the line. What you're hoping there is the bat is legit. I think he led the Big Ten in hitting, right? Hit 400 plus with power. He's another one that I think I was the highest on in the group list. I'm looking. I had him 16th, but everybody else was 27, 32, 25. So I was probably the most aggressive there. And again, haven't seen him, so that's just me kind of basing it on he was considered a top 100 draft prospect, so I figured, all right, well the system's not that strong. I'll throw him up there, but who knows? Like I said, within a year he could be off the top 30. He could be higher, but I feel like this is right. I feel like I was probably a little bit too high on him, but
no,
I'm excited to see if he can get up to. He's in Lakeland right now. He might get up to West Michigan, but probably not.
Yeah, because it seems like there would be a kind of a backlog of infielders at Erie at that point. Right now, Erie needs pitchers. Number 26 coming in, and Benji did this report as well. Benjamin rather did this report, and that was outfielder Trey Cruz, who makes our first appearance on the list. Although, don't let the numbers deceive you. He's currently batting .235. Until probably early July, he was one of the hottest hitters on the Seawolves, or I'm sorry, mid-June, I would say. And then he's kind of struggled here and there. But to me, what it impresses me about Trey Cruz, and when I had a chance to talk to him, was he learned the outfield for the first time. His father played the outfield for Toronto and Tampa and among other various teams. And he's handled himself defensively pretty well out there. On Sunday, there's an error he made that was, sometimes he makes routine errors, but overall, it's a much improved profile than what we saw last year.
Yeah, and I like you mentioned it. I think the addition of being able to play the outfield is what makes him a potential big leaguer, right? Because I don't think, despite he was hot, but I don't think it's ever going to be a great hit tool. I think it's kind of on base percentage driven offensive profile. He does take a lot of walks. He's got 5 walks and 1 strikeout in 6 games so far this month. But yeah, the bat to ball skills aren't ideal. There's a little pop in the bat though, so he's got a little bit of power. There's a little bit of speed, but it's the defensive versatility that I think is going to get him to the big leagues because he can play shortstop, he can play center field. He also plays other positions, but if you can do those 2 things, teams will find a place for you because that's a huge help to, if you got to move somebody around and you could trust somebody else to fill in shortstop and not be a disaster. And, I think his best position is probably second base. It might be an outfield position, but he can handle third, he can handle shortstop, he can handle left, right, and center. That's a huge help.
Definitely playing center field too.
And a switch hitter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot. I don't know if he's a regular player on a championship level team, but for a team like the Tigers that likes to mix and match and platoon and stuff, I think that he's got a chance.
Definitely. I was just gonna say, even when I remember we saw him the first day in Erie, starting center field, we're just like, what? And then we went up getting stories. So again, just to jump in there like that for the first time on a high level like that. Number 25 was Eddie's Leonard, and I did the report based off what I saw, very limited on what I saw in Great Lakes and Tulsa. But I will say this: I his swing has some natural loft to it, and it could be. That's why I put his power at 50, because I think the swing, if he can get better control of the strike zone, because he struggles a little bit of strike zone issues, he's around 23%, and I think that translates. I mean, it's the typical strikeout zone right now, or the typical strikeout rate, I think is in MLB. I forgot. I think I believe it's like 23, 24%. So, but on the minor league level, you got to kind of look at it. It's a completely different platform because, for example, let's say he was in AAA Oklahoma City, because then there's Pacific Coast League. Therefore, all the variables with that kind of get thrown out. So him going to Toledo might be a good thing, as Toledo's kind of internationally kind of more neutral. But anyway, I personally thought his swing, I like to swing a lot. His step, or run rather, he's really good first step out of the box. Kind of look like an average runner. His defense, and this is where I was kind of, I wish I had more of a sample size, but it does seem like he struggles with sometimes some routine plays where maybe he did mention this to a Dodgers podcast in the beginning of the year, that one of the things he wanted to work on was footwork and making himself better in the infield. But the arm right there, the arm plays out just fine. And I can see why, and Harris said this on the call, that he could see he's going to get some time in the outfield.
Yeah, he's the guy that I remember seeing with Great Lakes. And you're right. So I just looked up the average walk or average strikeout rate in the major leagues this year is 22.7%. That's league wide. So 23% is the average. Yeah, but it's not. I don't think strikeouts are a huge problem for him. Like you said, 21, 22%. That's fine in the minors, the mid minors, AA, AAA. Probably will translate to 25, 26, 27 in the big leagues, which is not a death knell these days. But there is a little bit of, I think, kind of, he doesn't strike out a ton because he's got feel to put the bat in the ball, but it's not always the best contact. He does have power. I don't know, there's a little bit of like a Willie Castro profile here. Castro's faster and I think more athletic, but Leonard probably has more game power, but it's still kind of a guy who's probably too aggressive for his own good. And that leads to some issues of not as much quality contact as you need. But there's some versatility, like you said, and you said you like the arm strength, and yeah, we'll see what happens with him. It was not. I wasn't hoping that he would be. I don't mean to. Let's see. I don't want to be rude, but I was hoping that there would be more interesting new players to talk about in the system after the trade deadline, and it didn't work out that way. We got two guys, and he's one of them.
Yeah, and again, I think he's Willie Castro with better plate discipline, perhaps. That's about the way to go about it. So number 24 is Sawyer Gipson-Long. So I did put some grades, and I'm finishing up the report today, or excuse me, as we record this.
Look at that picture of Sawyer Gipson-Long's face.
Yeah, dude, Sawyer Gipson-Long looks like a guy you wouldn't want to mess with at your local bar, like Roadhouse. Like, he looks like one of the enforcers in Roadhouse, if you're familiar with that 80s movie. For a lot of people, probably not, but either way. So I put his fastball at 40. It was really 91, 92. And he really, in terms of prospects, didn't make him really name himself until this year, where in 3 days he had to learn a cutter. He learned a cutter, and it's changed his game completely. So he now can go vertical on getting strikeouts, because the cutter has that natural bore. And Gipson-Long already has that kind of action, but right in the cutter allows it to ride in on righties, and I think that it's a good strikeout pitch for him, and it's still development. And even on Baseball Savant, necessarily doesn't list it, but we know based off our talks with Gabe Alvarez and talking to Greg that he is throwing that cutter, and his change is serviceable. It's a good mix when he can throw that, when he has his fastball, but I think his slider is still his best pitch. He can bury sliders pretty well, especially on lefties.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, I think that the slider and the changeup are both kind of good swing and miss pitches for him. And the Toledo data backs that up that we have. But there are also pitches that I think if you miss with them, and we saw this with Matthew Boyd forever, right? If you miss with those, they end up over the heart of the plate. They still get hit hard. And so I think what they wanted to add a pitch that could get him some softer contact, maybe, and that's kind of what cutters are designed to do. You want that late movement to kind of miss the barrel, get a ground ball, things like that. And his OPS against left-handers has gone down. It was a big issue a couple months ago, and then as you said, he took a start off and learned to cutter. And as we're saying, like, it's not. You can find AAA Statcast data now, but it's not listed as a cutter yet. And that's I think it's because they don't bother to go through and check and change things. So it's all kind of automated, right? In the minor leaguers, they don't go, okay, is this guy throwing a cutter or fastball? They don't really care. But from looking at the pitch level data, you'll see a pitch that's around 90 miles an hour that has significantly less horizontal movement than his fastball. And that makes it sound like it's bad, but it's not. It just means that it's not breaking from the heart of the plate as much. So it's moving in on hitters. Because his fastball has some natural, it's considered a four-seamer, but it's almost shaped like a sinker, really. It really runs a lot. So, I think that's added some help for him there. I still don't think it's a huge ceiling, right? Like we're thinking fifth starter, swingman, long reliever potential. But he's turned himself into, he got promoted to AAA for a reason, right? We talked about this before. If you're up in AAA, it's because the Tigers think that they might have a use for you.
Yeah, exactly. And right now the Tigers do need as many innings as possible from not only from their bullpen, from starters too. So they still have to figure out exactly what they're going to be doing with. You still have seen the likes of Casey Mize thrown off the mound, and when we were talking to AJ Hinch on Sunday, they're going to be really monitoring Tarik Skubal too. So it's again self-preservation based off the injury, and so you want to make sure that he is healthy and he's ready to go. So, Gibson Long could, I think, if he continues to work on his development, I think he's going to be a guy who, the fact, again, I'm still impressed at the fact that he learned a cutter in the season, was able to incorporate it relatively quickly and show some pretty quick results. And sometimes that takes forever. Speaking of taking forever, Christian Santana, number 23, and he's fallen on our list quite a bit, Chris. Talk about real quick, because we got to snap through these. We're already going through these, but but people want to know. People want to know. So
we give the people what they want. If
they
we give people what they want. 3 minutes about every single prospect, then that's what they're getting. Santana, actually, this is one where only you and I had him in our top 30. The other two did not, because I think basically because he was awful. He was awful for
just looking at the box scores.
So are we, really. I mean, we haven't seen a ton of Santana. We got video of Santana from early this season, and he looked really bad. The look test matched the stats, and he's been poor defensively at shortstop. I think we all expected him to be a second baseman anyway, but the shortstop thing hasn't worked very well. But over the last month plus 5 weeks, he's got a WRC plus of 180, 179 to be exact, since July 1st, and that's because he walks a ton. And he finally started hitting the ball. He hit the ball he's batting 270 or something like that with power. And that's kind of what we were hoping for from the start of this year, because he hit 215 last year, but the power and the patience was there. And this year it just has taken him until July to figure it out. So he's a little bit lower on our list because of the struggles, but we're encouraged by the progress lately. If he keeps it up, he'll probably be 10, 12 spots higher on our next ranking, but we'll see.
Yeah, he has a lot of promise left. Again, he's only 21, 22.
He's 19. He doesn't turn 20 till November.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's fine. He'll be fine.
It's like it was a product. There was a little bit too much hype. We hyped him up a little bit too much because he was so young, and you got to give these guys time to fail and reverse course.
Yeah, speaking of reversing course, number 22 is Jack O'Hoffman. Again, we've heard some fastball up to 95, 96 this year at West Michigan before he went from West Michigan to Toledo, which is very rare unless it's like an org move. And originally thought that was the case, but looking at the data, like we mentioned before, Jack's put up some really good numbers and he's holding his own. He just came off his best start against Iowa last week, where he struck out 8 and walked 3. To me, I think what stands out about him in the prospect side of things, I got to change the fastball. I have listed at 50. I'm going to put
Yeah, I
So
think that's
that was
fair.
just I didn't they had a chance to change that yet. Fastball 50, slider 50, and his changeup I think is 45. I think his changeup's a really good pitch, complements the fastball well. He's got to be locating correctly, but I think as far as swing and miss stuff goes, there is some angle to it. But I don't a guy like this. I think Chris is a back end starter. I don't know if he has enough to where you can see him like amp it up to be a reliever. I just see him as like a fifth starter type.
Yeah, well, I never know what to think about relievers, right? Because Garrett Hill was throwing 90, 93, and then they moved him to relief, and he's hitting like 97 consistently. So it wouldn't shock me if O'Loughlin threw harder in shorter stints. But to your point, yeah, like what makes him effective, I think, is the ability to throw. He throws the fastball, the slider, the curve, and the change. He's got a sinker variant of the fastball too. So he's basically a 5 pitch guy. He throws them all for strikes now. I think the changeup, like you're right. I think that was been the biggest improvement for him. He's always been able to spin the ball pretty well. That was his calling card even when he was 17. But now he's got the full arsenal. He's throwing more strikes, and he's just from watching the start the other day, and you could see it on our YouTube page. He knows how to pitch a little. He'll vary his timing to the plate. He'll quick pitch you. He'll change his delivery to hold guys on. So there's some feel for the game there too. And he's still only 23. I think he turns 24 later this year, maybe September, something like that. So relatively young, and yeah, there's a chance for another potential, as we said, kind of like a Gibson Long, but lefty, um, number 5 starter, swingman, long reliever, something like that, up and down guy from Toledo to Detroit.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't want to say a taxi guy, but kind of has that profile to him. And then number 21, Danny Serretti got off to a really good start last year. As I recall, he was in Erie right after he was drafted, which is very, very rare to see. And the season's kind of, I don't want to say come back down to earth per se, but as far as I will say, the one thing I wanted to say about his hitting tool is his swing's always kind of like you know when Danny Serretti's got it out there because his swing is very unique, but the power seems a little different than it was last year.
Yeah, that was the thing. We didn't get a great look at him last year. He played like 40 games total, maybe less than that, 30, and moved so quickly from West Michigan to Erie that it was hard to get a feel for what kind of player he was. He has a really good batting eye and good approach at the plate. Even when he's not hitting, he's putting up good at bats. And he started hitting a little bit more lately in Erie, but it's still not a ton. And that's the thing. I don't think there's much impact in the bat. He's got some raw juice, but I think his approach leads to less. He's not selling out for power. If he did, I don't know what kind of average he would hit for, but I think it's more of a slap approach. We hit the ball the other way, get on base. But yeah, his defense. I've been more impressed with his defense this year than from the short glimpses we saw last year. I think he played a lot of second base last year. He's playing mostly third base and shortstop this year. And he's not like a super twitchy athletic guy, but really good instincts. And one of the things I noted in the scouting report was that he really seems good at throwing on the move, throwing from odd angles, which is kind of what you like to see when a guy's in an unorthodox position. He can still fire a strike to first base. That makes up for a lot of any lack of athleticism you might see, because he doesn't have to square himself. He doesn't have to get in the proper position. So I think there's a utility infielder future here for him. Possibly he's another guy who's a switch hitter, so there's a little bit of hope there, and still maybe a little bit of upside. He's a 4-year college player. I wouldn't say there's a huge ceiling here, but yeah, I think this is about right for him where we have him ranked.
Yeah, again, he's a guy who you call like a baseball rat. I mean, he's a baseball junkie. He really gets in there and works his ass off. Number 20 is Troy Melton, and Melton is one of the few Lakeland or pitchers that were in Lakeland that are on our list, even among the top 20. And so Melton, we saw down in South Bend, struggled a little bit, but then got back on his feet, did a pretty good job to get a secondary man down. His fastball is probably one of the better ones we've seen, and there's some reliever risk to it. But overall, Chris, I think what I've seen from Melton is that if he can command his slider and change up better to complement that fastball, then I see a back end rotation guy here.
Yeah, I mean, he stands out most for his frame and his fastball. The fastball is like 94, 96. We saw it touch 97, 98. His very first outing in West Michigan. He's backed off just a little bit to throw more strikes. And he has the other pitches that they'll flash, maybe average, above average for you at times. He's just, I think it's learning to command those, learning when to use those, learning, maybe trying to refine those a little bit. I think, I feel like he's got kind of a slurvy breaking ball that's his best pitch, and he seems comfortable like backfooting it to lefties, which should give him a decent weapon. But yeah, it's still just kind of a really good arm in learning how to pitch right now. So, yeah, I think there's potential for a back end starter here, but I wouldn't shock me at all if he becomes a reliever.
Yeah, definitely. He could be a guy that you could see in the 8th or 9th inning sometime.
Yeah, there's like a Brisky level, like throwing 97, 98 or harder.
Yeah, and you could see him maybe perhaps saying another pitch or something to this effect and making him more dangerous as a reliever. And maybe like something, for example, if he's going to if his slider, like maybe it's like if it's going to be more swervy, how to define that and make it with better movement on it, if you will. Because I think his slider is good when it is on. It's pretty good when he commands it right. Number 19. So some of these we've already been familiar with. So it feels like, and Andre Lipsius, number 19 on the list. I know Chris has talked about where he's going to talk about here in a second where he moved up from, but I feel like he's a Tiger Mining Reporter original OG. He's been on the list for quite a while now.
Yeah, and I mean, you wouldn't say it, but you kind of latched on him almost immediately when we first saw him in West Michigan in 2019 after the draft. You said you liked him more than Nick Quintana, and he has proven to be a better professional baseball player than Nick Quintana. We had really high hopes heading into the season for him because he had a nice, 50-game run in AAA Toledo last year and had a strong spring. And then things just gone south for him in Toledo this year. And our suspicion is that he was trying to hit for more power. They've had him playing corner outfield. They've had him playing first base. And part of that is, I think, just getting more versatility out of him. Part of it is that they have a lot of other middle infielder types, second base, third base types, who probably have a little bit more range, a little more athleticism. And so when you get moved to the corner like that, first base to the corner outfield, you got to hit for more power. That's just kind of the rules in baseball, right? And I think he was trying for that, and we see it in the batted ball data, his swing data, a lot more balls in the air this year. And for him, that hasn't worked well. His power has gone down, his batting average has gone down, his WRC plus is down. But he's also been injured a little bit, and so he's working his way back up to Toledo right now, performing fine in West Michigan. But so yeah, he's just kind of I don't know. Did he fall? I'm trying to look. Did he fall?
Yeah, yes, he did. Yeah. So you have according to your notes here, you have based off
down 6.
Down 6. Yeah, and his
and we
tool
dropped
it down to 45.
Yeah, dropped the hit tool from 50 to 45, which I think is fair right now. I mean, you can't. I was looking forward to seeing him in the big leagues this year, and it's just things haven't gone its way, and he's just turned 25 not that long ago. But yeah, we still have some hope for him as a hitter. We've seen enough from him before to think that he can figure this out. He's a guy who's been willing to change his swing when he needed to, and so I think he'll figure it out. Hopefully, he'll have a solid stretch down the last part of the year, and maybe go to spring training next year trying to win a job somewhere.
Yeah, I'm still hopeful of him. I think that he's a guy who has. I remember early on in West Michigan, he was tweaking his swing early on, and he did all these adjustments. And he's a guy who studied nuclear engineering at the University of Tennessee. Smart guy, and I think putting that kind of work ethic into it is one of those intangibles that never hardly gets talked about. Sometimes is that people always are obsessed with like the tools and everything like that, but work ethic goes a long way. And so number 18 is Winfield Perez, who got off to the year with a slow start due to back injuries, but he's bounced up well, and he's earned a promotion to Toledo, where he's also seeing time in the outfield, and he's made a pretty good adjustment, showing his arm out there where there's not as many errors as he was at second base, where I was surprised we even stuck with the 45 defense a little bit there because I thought maybe his defense should be 40, but that's just me.
Well, yeah, and I don't think I had a 30 on his hit. I don't know. I don't know where that came from.
I'll
But
fix it. Yeah, my
no, it's
bad.
all good. It's yeah, you could certainly argue that the defense is you know, he's had some issues, that's for sure. But they're not. It's weird. It's not physical issues, right? He's got the athleticism to handle second base. He's played center field. He's played the corner outfields now. It's more of, for whatever reason, his throwing mechanics or his brain and throwing mechanics cause him to spray the ball all over the place, which is an issue. Um, I think maybe eventually he just settles into being a primary outfielder. But yeah, this year mostly like power went away. We were concerned about that. Then it came back nicely over the last month or so, at least a little bit. It's still not hitting for nearly as much power as he did last year, which was one of the big surprises of the year, honestly, because he's not a huge guy, but he's got some bat speed and he pulls the ball. And this year, he's really not doing much damage at all as a right-handed hitter. And we know he dealt with some back issues last year, so I don't know if that's lingering there, or if it's just a small sample size thing. But he's another guy, kind of like a Trey Cruz. Although I think I believe in him as a hitter more than Trey Cruz, if you will. Like I think his bat to ball skills are better than Trey Cruz's. He's a switch hitter. He plays multiple positions. He's got some speed. He's got a little bit of pop. I think there's a useful utility player there.
Yeah, considering he has come a long way. I mean, he got off to a really good start at West Michigan when West Michigan was single A, and there would be times where he would flash a month of really good hitting and then just stop. But now all of a sudden it's been more consistent ever since last year with Parker Meadows. Just been a model of consistency. You feel bad because that a back injury is just something that you don't think about until it happens because you realize how much you use with your back. So that's just something to consider. And this was at number 17, Paul Wilson, the Tigers' third round draft pick in this year's draft. Chris, talk about why he stands out at number 17.
Yeah, so this is the guy they gave, I think, a $1.7 million bonus to. He was considered a top 75-ish prospect in the draft by most of the ranking services. The lefty with four distinct pitches, good size. He's like 6'3", 200 pounds. Arm works well. It's just, and he's got the bloodlines too, right? His dad was a big league pitcher for parts of 8 years. So you're just kind of projecting a lot here. He's arguably the biggest lump of clay in this entire top 20, top 30, because we've seen what teams can do with pitchers. We've seen the Tigers do it. You take the raw ingredients and you refine them, and then suddenly you've got something that's much better than it looked like coming into it. And watching some of the clips of him online, it didn't look terribly impressive, right? He's got the four pitches, but the curveball is a little bit loopy. The slider is kind of sweepy. He loses his command, wasn't always there. But you look into the fact that he's got all those pitches, look into the body, and you project down the line, and he's got room to add another 25, 35 pounds of good weight as he fills out. And he's already sitting 91, 94. There were supposedly touched 97 in the spring. So you can project him to probably throw a little harder with a couple of years of professional training. And to me, it just, I think I put it in there. You could kind of dream on him and see maybe a Tarek Skubal down the road, a big 6'3" lefty with power, throwing hard, and having a full complement of secondary offerings. So far, far way away from that right now, but there's enough raw ingredients there to project that, or hope for that, I should say.
And with the development of the pitching staff, how they've done with the pitching across the board, I think that's totally feasible that they could find a way to continue to weaponize them. And so we go to number 16 and Dylan Dingler. And that hit tool ain't right either, is it?
No, it looks, well, for him, it might be. Actually, I think that might be right. Hit tool 30. Let me see. What did I do? I had Dingler. I guess I didn't adjust his hit tool, so I don't remember what it was before. It may have been, yeah, it was 30 before. That's what I had. So I feel confident there. I don't know where Rogelio went just now, but yeah. So Dylan Dingler, he's a guy that we've had in the top 10 in the past. I think generally hovering around the top of in the low teens at least. And he's not done anything necessarily wrong this year. He's injured right now, but he just hasn't taken. He's never really taken that step forward in Double-A that we hoped we would see. That it seemed like he hit a wall as soon as he got to Double-A. He was awesome in High A. He's awesome in Low A, but Double-A, he can't hit consistently. He'll have hot weeks. He'll have a good couple games, and then he'll go cold for a week or so. It's just not that consistent run of offensive success. And it's to the point now where it's hard to project him as anything more than a glove first backup. He's got the power. He's a good athlete, and the defense is strong. We talked about earlier. His receiving is the best in the organization. He's got a very strong arm. Basically everything you want from a catcher. He's just average-ish at blocking, if you will. But that's not a huge aspect of catching that you're terribly worried about. He doesn't, and it's almost sort of like you were saying earlier with routine plays. Like Dingler, if there's a man on third, Dingler's going to block the ball. It's more like just random fifth inning. There's a guy on first. It doesn't necessarily go all out to block a ball, and it's a fastball or a wild pitch or whatever. But other than that, yeah, he's a really good defender. So I think he's going to be a big league backup. It's just I think that's probably his ceiling now, because the offense is just a little light.
And the intangibles of him being a good leader too, as well. They talked
Yeah,
about the
that
difference
helps.
in Erie's locker room when he's not there, and it is clear when he's there, the pitching staff, there's a lot more of a comfortability. All right, let's stop here so we can split this in two. So let me do this real quick. And this, I'll send you another link.